Chapter 1. Comfortable silence. Sam Jefferson liked his life. That realization surprised him sometimes. A lot of people spent their 30s talking about what they hadn't achieved yet. Sam occasionally encountered former classmates online who seemed trapped in a constant race toward some invisible finish line. Bigger houses, better jobs, new titles, more followers. Sam had never been particularly interested in racing anyone. His life wasn't flashy, but it was his. He had a house with a mortgage he could comfortably afford. He had a backyard that needed too much mowing and a kitchen he still hadn't fully unpacked after moving in 8 months earlier. Most importantly, he had a job he genuinely enjoyed. That alone felt increasingly rare. As he shut down his computer on a Friday afternoon, he glanced around the office. Most of his co-workers had already started mentally checking out for the weekend. Conversations drifted between cubicles. Someone laughed near the break room. Sam smiled. He'd worked here since graduating college. Nearly 12 years. He wasn't trapped. He stayed because he wanted to. The company trusted him. Nobody hovered over his shoulder. Nobody demanded hourly progress reports. When they gave him an assignment, they assumed it would get done. And it always did. Trust was hard to earn and easy to lose. Sam valued it. His phone buzzed. A message from Mark. Don't forget. O'Malley's. 7 o'clock. A second text followed immediately. And no excuses. Sam chuckled. What's funny? He looked up. Emily Carter stood near his desk. For a moment, his brain entirely forgot how conversations worked. Oh, Mark. Brilliant. A truly masterful response. Emily smiled. He threatening you again? He's very committed to making sure I socialize. I've noticed. Her smile broadened. There it was again. That smile. The one that always seemed directed specifically at him. Except that couldn't be right. Emily was friendly with everyone. Friends smiled at each other. Normal people understood that. Unfortunately, Sam was currently too aware of how blue her eyes looked beneath the office lights to qualify as normal. He texting about tonight? She asked. Yeah. You coming? The question came out quickly, almost eagerly. Sam felt a small flicker of confidence. Maybe tonight. Maybe this time he'd actually manage a real conversation with her. Yeah, he said. I wouldn't want Mark organizing a search party. Emily laughed. I'll see you there then. Before he could think of something clever, charming, or even moderately memorable to say, a voice called from down the hall. Emily. She glanced over her shoulder. I've got to run. See you tonight. Then she was gone. Sam stared after her for approximately 3 seconds before forcing himself back to reality. 3 seconds too many. You're staring. Sam turned. Mark was leaning against a nearby cubicle wall. Go away. No. Please. No. Sam sighed. Mark grinned. You're hopeless. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. I don't. Sam. What? You look at Emily like a golden retriever that's afraid to climb onto furniture. Sam frowned. What does that even mean? It means you clearly want to, but you've somehow convinced yourself you're not allowed. That's ridiculous. Mark laughed. See you tonight. Then he disappeared before Sam could defend himself. Not that he had a defense. That was the annoying part. By 7:30 that evening, O'Malley's was crowded. The restaurant wasn't fancy. That was part of its appeal. Good burgers, cold beer, friendly atmosphere. Sam had barely sat down before a glass appeared in front of him. You're late, Mark said. I was 3 minutes late. Late is late. You're impossible. I've been told. The group around the table laughed. Sam settled into his chair and glanced around casually. Or at least he hoped it looked casual. Emily sat across from him. She was wearing jeans and a dark green sweater. Simple, effortless, beautiful. Not that he was fixating. Much. The conversation flowed easily. Weekend plans, movies, sports, vacation stories. Sam mostly listened. Not because he was shy. Listening was simply his default setting. When he did speak, people paid attention. That was enough for him. At one point, Emily leaned slightly forward. What would you do if money didn't matter? The question caught the table by surprise. Mark groaned. Oh no. Philosophical Emily is here. Answer the question, she said. He rolled his eyes. I'd travel. Predictable. What about you? Someone asked. Emily looked thoughtful. I think I'd open a bookstore. Several people nodded. Then she looked at Sam. What about you? Sam hesitated. Everyone else had given adventurous answers. His felt boring. I'd probably keep doing most of what I'm doing. Emily blinked. Really? Mostly. Why? The table fell quiet. Sam shrugged. I like my life. The words came out simply. Honestly. No performance. No attempt to impress anyone. I worked hard for it. Doesn't make sense to build a life you don't enjoy living. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Emily smiled. Not a polite smile. A genuine one. Warm. I like that answer. Something fluttered unexpectedly inside his chest. Before he could respond, a waiter arrived with another tray of food. The moment vanished. Again. Somewhere in the universe, Sam imagined there was a cosmic employee whose sole responsibility was preventing him from talking to Emily for more than 30 consecutive seconds. The employee was apparently excellent at the job. The evening continued. People talked. They laughed. Hours passed. Several opportunities appeared. Each disappeared. Someone interrupted. The conversation shifted. Phone rang. A new topic emerged. By the time the group finally started gathering coats, Sam felt the familiar frustration settling in. Another chance gone. Another evening spent almost saying something. Outside, cool air drifted through the parking lot. People dispersed toward their cars. Emily ended up standing beside him. Alone. Finally, his pulse immediately tripled. Say something. Anything. This was fun, he managed. Outstanding. A true poet. It was, Emily agreed. A brief silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Just unfinished. Sam could feel an opportunity sitting directly in front of him. All he had to do was reach for it. Ask her to coffee. Ask her to dinner. Ask literally anything. Then headlights swung into the parking lot. Emily, she turned. A friend of hers waved from a car window. Oh, disappointment flashed across her face so quickly Sam almost thought he imagined it. I should go. Yeah. Another pause. Good night, Sam. Good night. She climbed into the waiting car. Moments later, she was gone. Sam stood in the parking lot watching the taillights disappear. Then he shook his head and laughed quietly to himself. Months of this. One day he promised himself the timing would finally work. One day the universe would stop interrupting. He had no way of knowing that the universe had already started making other plans. And some of those plans involved beer, a microphone, and a side of himself nobody had ever seen. Chapter 2. Mixed signals. The following 3 weeks convinced Sam Jefferson that timing was a real thing. Not in a cosmic destiny sort of way. Just a practical, irritating reality that seemed determined to make his life increasingly complicated. Every time he worked up the nerve to talk to Emily Carter, something happened. One Saturday afternoon, she arrived at a friend's backyard barbecue just as Sam had finally decided he was going to ask if she wanted to grab coffee sometime. 5 minutes later, the host accidentally dropped an entire tray of hamburger buns into the grass. The resulting chaos somehow turned Sam into an impromptu grilling assistant for the next hour. By the time he escaped, Emily was deep in conversation with a group across the yard. Another opportunity gone. A week later, their friend group attended trivia night. Emily spent most of the evening at the same table. Twice, Sam almost started a conversation. Twice, somebody else beat him to it. By the end of the night, he knew obscure facts about medieval castles and Australian wildlife, but had made absolutely no progress where Emily was concerned. It was becoming absurd. Unfortunately, absurdity didn't make it any less frustrating. Tonight was another group gathering. A dozen people occupied a large corner booth at a local sports bar. The television screens overhead played a baseball game that nobody was really watching. The conversation had splintered into smaller groups. Sam sat near the end of the table nursing a beer. Across from him, Emily was laughing at something one of her friends had said. Her laughter always caught his attention. Not because it was loud. Quite the opposite. It was genuine. The kind that made other people want to smile too. As if sensing his gaze, she looked over. Their eyes met. She smiled immediately. Not the polite smile people gave strangers. Not the distracted smile people used to acknowledge someone's existence. This one was direct. Personal. For him. Sam smiled back. Then, because he was a complete idiot, he immediately looked away. A second later, he silently regretted it. Across the table, Emily's smile faded slightly. Not from hurt. More from confusion. She'd been collecting moments like that for months. Little interactions that never quite made sense. Sam always seemed happy to see her. He always listened when she talked. He remembered details from conversations other people forgot. When she mentioned feeling nervous before a family event, he asked about it 2 weeks later. When she recommended a book, he actually read it. When she told a story, he paid attention. Those things mattered. They meant something. At least she thought they did. The problem was that every positive signal came paired with an equal amount of uncertainty. The man could carry a 20-minute conversation with her about absolutely anything, then spend the next hour acting as though he was afraid to look directly at her. She found him impossible to decode. What are you staring at? Emily jumped slightly. Her friend Sarah grinned knowingly. Nothing. Aha. Nothing. Sarah followed Emily's line of sight. Took less than 2 seconds. Oh. Emily groaned. No. Still him. Stop. Sarah laughed. You realize everyone sees this, right? Emily looked horrified. Everyone. Everyone except the 2 people involved. That's reassuring. It's hilarious. Emily sank lower in her seat. I don't even know if he likes me. Sarah stared at her. Then she laughed harder. Emily frowned. What? You cannot be serious. I am serious. He absolutely likes you. You don't know that. He looks at you like he just discovered sunlight. Emily tried not to smile. Failed. Immediately. Sarah pointed. See. Stop it. No. Emily shook her head. If he likes me, Why doesn't he do anything? That question silenced even Sarah for a moment, because it was a fair one. Finally she shrugged. Maybe he's nervous. Nervous. Believe it or not, men can be nervous too. Emily looked across the room again. Sam was listening to a conversation beside him. Quiet as usual. Comfortable. Relaxed. He never seemed nervous. At least not until she was involved. Then he became unpredictable. And maybe Sarah was right. Maybe she wasn't imagining it. Maybe he really was nervous. The possibility stayed with her for the rest of the evening. A few days later, Sam found himself at a local farmer's market on a Saturday morning. He needed vegetables. That had been the plan. A boring, responsible adult errand. Then he spotted Emily standing beside a flower vendor. His heart nearly stopped. Not permanently, just enough to be inconvenient. She hadn't seen him yet. For a brief moment he considered walking over immediately. A simple greeting. Normal conversation. Nothing complicated. Easy. Then she looked up. Their eyes met. A bright smile spread across her face. And somehow that made the situation infinitely more difficult. Sam. Okay. Too late to retreat now. Hey. Smooth. Very smooth. Emily stepped away from the flower display. What are you doing here? Buying groceries. Interesting. I know. My life is incredibly exciting. She laughed. Good thing I ran into you. The words landed somewhere in Sam's chest. Good thing. She was happy to see him. That seemed positive. Probably. Unless she said that to everyone. Which she very well might. Unfortunately, Sam's brain always found ways to create doubt. They started walking together between vendor stalls. The conversation came naturally. Easier than it should have. Movies they'd seen recently. Weekend projects around Sam's house. Family stories. The usual comfortable rhythm they always seemed to find. For nearly 20 minutes, everything went perfectly. No interruptions. No disasters. No random emergencies. Just conversation. The longest uninterrupted conversation they'd ever had. For the first time, Sam started believing he might actually ask her out. Then his phone rang. Of course it did. He glanced at the screen. His brother. Emily smiled. You should get that. Yeah. The moment disappeared. Not dramatically. Not permanently. But enough. His brother needed help moving furniture. Emily needed to finish shopping. 5 minutes later they were standing near the parking lot. Another crossroads. Another opportunity. Sam felt it. The possibility sat right there between them. Ask her. Just ask. Coffee. Lunch. Dinner. Anything. Instead he hesitated. Emily waited. 1 second. 2. 3. The hesitation stretched. Eventually she smiled. Well, good luck with the furniture. Thanks. See you later. Yeah. See you. She turned and walked away. Sam watched her go before letting out a frustrated sigh. What is wrong with me? The question received no answer. Unfortunately, the universe seemed content letting him figure that out himself. That evening, Emily sat on her couch replaying the interaction. Again, and again, and again. 20 minutes together. Just the two of them. If he'd wanted to ask her out, that should have been the perfect chance. Shouldn't it? Every reasonable part of her brain said yes, but another part kept defending him. Maybe he needed more time. Maybe he wasn't sure she was interested. Maybe she hadn't made it obvious enough. The thought annoyed her, because if she made it any more obvious, she might as well print flyers and distribute them across town. Her phone vibrated. A text from Sarah. Any progress? Emily rolled her eyes. No. The answer arrived instantly. I'm adopting both of you. Emily laughed despite herself. That's not how adoption works. It does when two adults are incapable of communicating. Emily stared at the message. Then she reluctantly admitted something. Sarah wasn't entirely wrong. She had been waiting for Sam to make the first move for months. Maybe she was as guilty as he was. Maybe they were both waiting for certainty that didn't exist. Two careful people standing still because neither wanted to risk being wrong. The realization was uncomfortable. Mostly because it felt true. Meanwhile, across town, Sam sat alone in his living room. A baseball game played quietly on television. He wasn't watching it. His thoughts were somewhere else. Specifically, at a farmer's market parking lot where he'd once again failed to say something remarkably simple. He leaned back against the couch. At some point this had stopped being about confidence. He wasn't afraid of talking to women. He wasn't afraid of rejection. At least not entirely. What scared him more was losing what already existed. He liked spending time with Emily. He liked talking to her. If he asked her out and she wasn't interested, all of that could become awkward, complicated, different. The risk never felt small. But as he sat there thinking about her smile that morning, another realization slowly emerged. Doing nothing carried a risk too, because eventually someone else might ask. Someone less cautious. Someone willing to take the chance. And if that happened, Sam would have nobody to blame but himself. For the first time in months, that possibility genuinely bothered him. Enough that he began considering a radical new idea. The next time an opportunity appeared, he might actually do something about it. Whether the universe approved or not. Chapter 3. Advice nobody asked for. By the following Friday, Sam Jefferson had reached an uncomfortable conclusion. His friends were conspiring against him. Not maliciously, not even secretly. At this point, they were barely pretending otherwise. He discovered this fact approximately 10 minutes after arriving at Mark's house for a weekend cookout. "You're late." Sam looked up from the cooler he was carrying. "Why does everyone keep saying that?" "Because you're late. It's 2 minutes." Mark waved dismissively. "Not important." "Then why mention it?" "Tradition." Sam shook his head. A few people were already gathered on the back patio. Music played softly from a speaker. The smell of grilled food drifted through the yard. The atmosphere was relaxed. Unfortunately, Mark wore the expression of a man preparing trouble. Sam recognized it instantly. "Whatever you're thinking," Sam said. "Don't." "Interesting." It wasn't a suggestion. Mark grinned. "Oh, this is definitely going to be fun." Sam immediately regretted attending. His suspicion proved correct 15 minutes later. He was standing beside the grill talking with a couple of friends when Mark casually appeared. A little too casually, like an actor entering a scene. "You know," Mark said loudly, "Emily should be here any minute." Sam narrowed his eyes. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Nothing." "Mark." "Nothing at all." The other two men immediately started laughing. Sam groaned. "Unbelievable." "What? You people are like 12 years old." 13. One friend corrected. "On a good day." The laughter grew louder. Sam considered leaving. Not permanently, just hiding somewhere. Unfortunately, before he could formulate an escape plan, a familiar voice appeared behind him. "What's so funny?" "Emily." Of course. The group immediately became suspiciously well-behaved. Too well-behaved. The kind of well-behaved that somehow felt even more alarming. "Nothing," Mark said. Emily looked skeptical. "You guys always say that." "Because it's usually true." "It never is." She smiled and settled into the conversation. For the next half hour things remained surprisingly normal. Sam found himself relaxing. Maybe he'd overreacted. Maybe his friends weren't actually plotting anything. Maybe. "So, when are you two going on a date?" Sam nearly inhaled half his drink. Around him, absolute silence fell. Mark looked extremely pleased with himself. Emily looked equally shocked. Someone dropped a fork. The sound seemed unnaturally loud. Sam stared. "You can't just ask that." "Why not?" "Because that's insane. Seems efficient." "It isn't efficient." Mark shrugged. "Disagree." A few people nearby were openly laughing now. Emily covered her face with one hand. "Oh my God." Sam wanted the earth to swallow him. Immediately, without delay. Unfortunately, the earth declined. Mark looked between them, then sighed dramatically. "You know what's amazing?" Nobody answered. "The fact that neither of you has figured this out yet." "Figured what out?" Emily asked. Mark pointed at both of them. "This." His finger moved back and forth. "Sam. Emily. Sam. Emily." Like he was directing traffic. "Mark," Sam warned. "What?" "Everybody knows." "Everybody." "Everybody." Several people around the patio nodded. Far too many people. Sam felt heat crawling up his neck. This was a nightmare. Not because of Emily. Because of the audience. Emily looked equally embarrassed. And yet, she wasn't angry. That surprised him. If anything, she seemed more surprised than upset. An opportunity appeared. Tiny. Fragile. A chance to say something honest. Then someone's phone rang. Another conversation started nearby. The moment dissolved into general commotion. Sam nearly laughed. Of course. Naturally. Why would today be different? Later that evening, after food had been eaten and the gathering had settled into smaller conversations, Emily found herself sitting with Sarah near the edge of the patio. The sun had started setting. Golden light stretched across the yard. Sarah wasted exactly 8 seconds before bringing up the obvious topic. "So," Emily groaned. "No. So. Absolutely not." Sarah grinned. "You enjoyed that." "I wanted to disappear." "You enjoyed it." Emily shook her head. "I did not." "You kind of did." She hated that Sarah wasn't entirely wrong. Because beneath the embarrassment had been something else. Validation. Not from Mark. Certainly not from Mark. But from everybody else's reactions. None of them had looked surprised. Not one. And that was difficult to ignore. "You know what I don't understand?" Emily asked. "What?" "If everybody thinks he likes me, why won't he do anything?" Sarah considered the question. "Honestly, yeah. I think he's terrified." Emily laughed. "Sam isn't terrified of anything." "That's where you're wrong." Sarah glanced across the yard. Sam stood talking with a few friends. Comfortable, confident, relaxed, the picture of composure. Then his eyes drifted toward Emily. Just for a moment. Long enough to check where she was. Long enough for Sarah to catch it. Long enough for him to immediately look away when Emily turned her head. Sarah pointed. "That." Emily followed her gaze. Sam was suddenly very interested in a nearby lawn chair. Her stomach fluttered. "Oh, exactly." Sarah leaned back. He looks nervous only when you're involved. The realization settled somewhere deep inside Emily's chest, because once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. The awkward pauses, the hesitation, the near conversations, the way he seemed perfectly capable around literally everyone else. Maybe she hadn't been imagining things after all. Maybe they were both simply terrible at this. A few days later, Sam received an invitation to dinner from his older brother, Ryan. The dinner itself was pleasant. The interrogation that followed was less so. It started innocently enough. Then Ryan asked a question. Anyone special? Sam should have seen it coming. No. Ryan looked unconvinced. His wife immediately perked up. That should have been a warning sign. There is someone. No. There absolutely is. There isn't. Ryan's wife smiled. The smile of someone discovering valuable gossip. What happened? Nothing happened. Which means something happened. Sam sighed. I hate both of you. No, you don't. Unfortunately, she was right. Ryan folded his arms. What's her name? Nobody. That's not a name. Sam stared at his brother. Ryan stared back. The silence stretched. Eventually Sam lost. Emily. Both of them immediately reacted. Not dramatically, just knowingly, as though receiving confirmation of something they'd already suspected. And somehow that made everything worse. How long? Ryan asked. A while. And have you asked her out? Sam didn't answer. Ryan's wife laughed. Oh wow. What? You haven't? No. Why? The question sounded simple. It wasn't. Because there wasn't one answer. There were dozens. What if she wasn't interested? What if he misread everything? What if things became awkward? What if he lost a friendship before it ever became one? Ryan listened quietly. Then he shook his head. You know what I think? I'm sure you're going to tell me. I think you've gotten so used to being careful that you've forgotten how to take a risk. The words landed harder than Sam expected, because they contained just enough truth to be uncomfortable. Ryan continued. You bought a house by yourself. That's different. You changed your entire financial life to make that happen. I had a plan. So make one for this. Sam laughed. It doesn't work that way. No. Ryan smiled. It doesn't. And somehow that was exactly the point. That night, alone in his house, Sam sat on his back porch. The summer air was cool. Crickets chirped somewhere beyond the fence. His thoughts drifted toward Emily. Again. Lately it seemed impossible not to. For months he'd told himself there was no rush. Eventually the timing would be right. Eventually a perfect opportunity would appear. Eventually everything would line up. But the more he thought about it, the more ridiculous that sounded. Life wasn't waiting for perfection. Life just kept moving. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. People made choices. Or they didn't. And sometimes doing nothing was still a choice. His phone buzzed. A message notification. Without thinking, he checked it. Emily. His pulse immediately accelerated. Had fun at Mark's cookout. Sorry, everyone was being weird. Sam stared at the message. Then laughed. A second notification appeared. Well, weirder than usual. He smiled. Before he could overthink it, he typed back. That's a pretty high standard. The reply came almost instantly. True. For the next 20 minutes, they exchanged messages. Nothing dramatic. Nothing flirtatious. Just conversation. Easy. Comfortable. Natural. Yet when the exchange finally ended, Sam found himself staring at the last message longer than necessary. Because for the first time in months, something felt different. Not solved. Not guaranteed. Just different. A little less impossible. And somewhere across town, Emily was sitting on her couch smiling at her phone for exactly the same reason. Neither of them knew that events were already beginning to move faster than either expected. Because sometimes all it took was one small crack in a wall of silence. And that wall was finally starting to break. Chapter 4. The open mic disaster plan. The wall of silence between Sam Jefferson and Emily Carter didn't shatter all at once. Cracked. Then cracked some more. The text conversation after Mark's cookout led to another conversation 2 days later. Then another. Nothing overly dramatic. Nobody confessed hidden feelings. Nobody suddenly became smooth, confident, or particularly brave. They simply started talking more. And for two people who had spent months circling the same conversation, that was significant progress. Unfortunately, progress created a new problem. The more Sam talked with Emily, the more he liked her. The more he liked her, the more important getting things right became. And the more important it became, the easier it was to overthink. Which was exactly what he was doing on a Thursday evening while standing in his kitchen. His phone sat on the counter. A text conversation with Emily remained open. He had typed, "Want to grab coffee this weekend?" Then deleted it. Typed it again. Deleted it again. Then stared at the blank screen. You are pathetic. The observation came from Sam himself. No one else was present. His refrigerator remained unsympathetic. The phone remained equally unimpressed. Eventually he tossed it onto the counter and walked away. 5 minutes later he came back and checked it. As though the problem might have solved itself. It hadn't. The next evening, the friend group gathered downtown. The original plan was dinner. The actual plan, as often happened with this particular group, had evolved into something considerably less organized. "You're coming." Mark pointed at Sam. It wasn't a suggestion. "I'm already here. Dinner isn't the important part." "That's concerning." "It should be." Sam looked around the restaurant. People were arriving in clusters. Conversations overlapped. Laughter filled the room. Then he spotted Emily entering through the front door. His attention immediately shifted. She was wearing a navy blue blouse and jeans. Simple, effortless, the kind of look that somehow managed to completely derail his train of thought. She spotted him, smiled, walked over. "Hey, hey." A brief silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just familiar. "It looks like everyone showed up," she said. "Apparently." Mark threatened people. "That sounds like him." "It really does." They both laughed. The ease of it made Sam wonder why asking her out felt so much harder than simply talking to her. Before he could dwell on that mystery, the rest of the group engulfed them. Soon they were all seated together. Dinner passed in a blur of stories and jokes. Sam found himself sitting beside Emily, a dangerous arrangement. Not because anything bad happened. Quite the opposite. Every conversation felt effortless. Every smile encouraged him. Every laugh made him want to stay right where he was. This, he thought, was exactly why he needed to do something. Because remaining stuck in limbo forever wasn't a plan. It was avoidance disguised as patience. The realization followed him throughout the meal. Then Mark made an announcement. "Good news." Everyone groaned. Nobody trusted those words when spoken by Mark. "What?" Emily asked. "The restaurant has open mic night." More groans. "Terrible news," someone corrected. "Excellent news." "It is not." "It is." The argument spread around the table. Sam paid little attention, until Mark continued. "They start in 30 minutes. "Still not seeing the good part," Emily said. "The good part is watching complete strangers make questionable decisions. I do enjoy that. Everybody enjoys that." The conversation moved on. Sam forgot about it, at least temporarily. An hour later, dinner had ended. Most of the group remained. A small platform stage occupied one corner of the restaurant. Several brave volunteers had already performed. The results varied wildly. One college student had delivered an excellent acoustic set. Another performer had forgotten half his lyrics and compensated with confidence. A middle-aged woman had sung an 80s rock song so enthusiastically that nobody cared whether she hit every note. The audience loved her. The atmosphere was relaxed, supportive, fun. The kind of place where people applauded effort as much as talent. Sam sat with another beer, then another. Not drunk, just relaxed. The pleasant warmth of alcohol softened the edges of his usual caution. Around him, conversations flowed freely, including one that unexpectedly caught his attention. "I heard Daniel finally ask somebody out." Sam glanced toward Sarah. "Who?" Emily asked. "Some woman he's been talking about for months." Emily laughed. "Good for him, right?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't understand people who wait forever." The words hit Sam harder than they should have. "I mean seriously," Sarah continued. "At some point you have to take a chance." Several people murmured agreement. Emily nodded too. "That's true." Sam suddenly found his beer fascinating. "Otherwise somebody else gets there first," Sarah said. "Exactly," Emily replied. Something uncomfortable settled in his chest, because he'd been telling himself there was always time. But there wasn't. Not necessarily. Emily wasn't waiting in suspended animation. She lived her life, met people, made plans, had options. The idea bothered him more than he expected. Far more. A dangerous combination formed inside him. Months of frustration, a growing certainty about his feelings, and just enough alcohol to quiet the cautious voice usually sitting in the driver's seat. The result was predictably unwise. "Hold on." Mark looked over. "What?" Sam stood. "I'll be right back." Several people blinked. "Where are you going?" Emily asked. "Not sure." Which, in hindsight, was an alarming answer. The sign-up sheet sat near the stage. Sam stared at it. His pulse pounded. This was stupid. Objectively stupid. Possibly one of the dumbest ideas he'd ever had. He should go back to the table. Sit down. Finish his beer. Continue being sensible. Instead, he picked up the pen. The name appeared before his better judgment could intervene. Sam Jefferson. The moment he finished writing, reality returned. "Oh no." The event coordinator looked up. "You signing up?" "Apparently." "Excellent." She added his name to the list, and just like that, it became real. Sam walked back toward the table feeling like he'd accidentally launched himself off a cliff. Mark frowned. "You look weird." "I've made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "The permanent kind." Emily looked concerned. "Sam." Before he could answer, a voice echoed through the room. "Our next performer tonight is Sam Jefferson." The table froze. Sam closed his eyes. Several people looked at him, then at the stage, then back at him. Mark's mouth slowly fell open. "Absolutely not." "Oh, absolutely yes," Sam said. "You signed up." Unfortunately, the shock across the table was almost impressive. Nobody appeared more stunned than Emily. "You're singing?" she asked. Sam gave a small nod. "I think so." "You think so? I'm committed now." "Since when do you sing?" He laughed nervously. "Since always." Nobody spoke. That answer somehow raised more questions than it answered. The coordinator called his name again. Applause began. Expectant. Waiting. Sam stood. Every rational part of his brain demanded retreat. Every ounce of common sense argued for surrender. But for once, common sense was losing. He looked briefly toward Emily. Their eyes met, and something inside him finally decided. Enough. Enough waiting. Enough almost. Enough someday. Whether this ended brilliantly or disastrously, he was done hiding. A microphone waited beneath the spotlight. The stage wasn't far away, but it felt like crossing an entire lifetime. Sam took a deep breath, then walked toward it. Behind him, an utterly speechless table watched in stunned silence. And none of them had the slightest idea what was about to happen. Chapter 5. Tennessee Whiskey. For one terrible, unforgettable moment, Sam Jefferson considered running. Not walking away, not politely backing out. Running, straight through the nearest exit, possibly to another state. Instead, he kept moving toward the stage. The applause around the room grew louder, encouraging, supportive, completely unaware that he was questioning every decision that had led him here. The microphone stood beneath a warm spotlight. Waiting. Sam climbed the short set of steps and immediately became aware of every person in the restaurant. The audience, the staff, the strangers, most importantly, the people seated at the table near the center of the room. His friends. And Emily. He looked in her direction. She was staring at him. Not laughing. Not confused. Just watching. Waiting. 100 thoughts collided inside his head. The sensible thing would be to tell a joke. Claim it was a dare. Do something that lowered expectations. But for whatever reason, he found himself strangely calm. The nervousness was still there. Yet underneath it lived something else. Relief. For the first time in months, he wasn't hiding. The coordinator handed him the microphone. "What are you singing?" Sam smiled nervously. "Tennessee Whiskey." Several people in the crowd cheered. Apparently it was a popular choice. That realization did absolutely nothing to help his confidence. The music began. A few opening notes drifted through the speakers. Slow. Familiar. The room settled. Conversations quieted. People turned their attention toward the stage. Sam took one steadying breath. Then he sang. The first line left his mouth, and the entire room changed. At least that's how it felt. Because the moment his voice filled the space, every ounce of nervous energy vanished. Years of singing alone in his truck. Singing while doing chores. Singing in empty rooms when nobody could hear him. All of it suddenly had somewhere to go. The deep, rich notes carried through the restaurant effortlessly. Strong. Smooth. Confident. The kind of voice that demanded attention without trying. At the table, Mark's jaw physically dropped. Sarah blinked. Twice. A friend nearly spilled his drink. Nobody seemed capable of processing what they were hearing. Because this wasn't merely good. This wasn't the pleasant surprise of discovering a hidden hobby. This was legitimate talent. The kind that made people stop talking. The kind that made strangers turn in their seats. Halfway through the first verse, the restaurant had gone almost completely silent. Not from politeness. From shock. Emily felt her breath catch. She honestly couldn't remember blinking. The man on stage looked familiar and completely unfamiliar at the same time. He was still Sam. The same thoughtful, kind, quiet man she had spent months trying to understand. Yet something was different. The hesitation was gone. The uncertainty was gone. For those few minutes beneath the spotlight, he appeared entirely comfortable being seen. And it was impossible to look away. The lyrics continued. His voice wrapped around each note with effortless control. Not flashy. Not showy. Just honest. Authentic. The emotion carried through every word. Emily had always assumed she knew who Sam was. Now she realized she'd only known part of him. And suddenly a dozen confusing moments from the past several months made sense. The way he listened. The way he noticed details. The way he spoke only when he had something meaningful to say. He wasn't withholding himself. He was simply careful about who got to see him fully. The realization settled deep inside her chest. And it stayed there. Across the room, Mark finally managed to speak. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "What?" Nobody answered. Because nobody had an answer. Sarah glanced toward Emily, then immediately smiled. Emily wasn't looking at anyone except Sam. And that told Sarah everything. The song reached the chorus. The energy in the room shifted again. Several audience members began swaying slightly. Others nodded along with the music. Even people who had never met Sam seemed captivated. Meanwhile, Sam focused on one thing. One person. Emily. Not constantly. Not obviously. But every few moments his eyes found her. And each time they did, she was already looking at him. The connection sent another surge of courage through him. For months he'd struggled to communicate his feelings. Months of saying almost enough. Months of stopping just short of honesty. Yet somehow this felt easier. Not because music was magic. Because it stripped away overthinking. There was no hiding inside a song. No careful wording. No perfectly timed conversation. Just sincerity. And for once, sincerity felt enough. The final verse arrived. The final chorus followed. The restaurant seemed impossibly still. Every person waiting, listening, watching. Then the last note faded. For a heartbeat, absolute silence filled the room. A suspended moment. Then the place exploded. Applause crashed through the restaurant. Cheers followed. Several people stood. Whistles echoed from the back of the room. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Sam froze. He genuinely hadn't expected this. A smile spread across his face despite himself. The audience continued applauding. At the table, Mark stood shaking his head. No. Sam laughed. The microphone caught it. The crowd laughed too. Finally, he managed a small wave before handing back the microphone. His legs felt strangely unsteady as he left the stage. Not from fear. Adrenaline. Pure adrenaline. The walk back to the table seemed longer than the walk up. Mostly because every person he passed wanted to congratulate him. A stranger stopped him. Dude, that was incredible. Thank you. Another person offered a high five. Someone else shouted that he should do another song. Sam felt completely out of his element. By the time he reached the table, everyone was staring at him. Mark spoke first. Naturally. What is wrong with you? Sam laughed. A lot of things. No. Mark pointed accusingly. You don't get to casually reveal that. Reveal what? That. He flailed toward the stage. You sing like that and never told anybody? Several people immediately agreed. Emily remained quiet, still watching him, still processing. Sam rubbed the back of his neck. It never came up. It never came up? Mark looked personally offended. 12 years. I wasn't hiding. You were absolutely hiding. The rest of the group laughed. For once, Sam couldn't really argue. Maybe he had been hiding. Not intentionally, but still. The conversation swirled around him. Questions, jokes, demands for another performance. Yet through all of it, he remained aware of only one thing. Emily hadn't said anything. Not yet. Eventually the noise around the table settled enough for her to speak. Her expression remained thoughtful, soft, almost vulnerable. That was beautiful. The words hit harder than the applause had. Much harder. Because they came from her. Sam met her eyes. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The crowd, the restaurant, the noise, all of it faded. Thank you, he said quietly. The smile she gave him in return felt different from every smile before. Warmer, more certain. As though something had finally clicked into place. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. And remarkably, nobody interrupted. Nobody called for attention. Nobody changed the subject. For the first time in months, the universe seemed content to leave them alone. Then Sarah leaned toward Emily with all the subtlety of a marching band. Emily ignored her. Mostly. But a faint blush appeared anyway. Sam noticed. And for the first time all night, something occurred to him that hadn't seemed possible before. Maybe, just maybe, the feeling he'd been carrying around for months wasn't one-sided. The thought was terrifying, exciting, hopeful, and infinitely more dangerous than getting on stage had been. Because singing in front of strangers suddenly seemed easy. Talking honestly to Emily Carter was another challenge entirely. One he would soon discover he could no longer avoid. Chapter 6. Finally talking the Monday after open mic night felt strangely unreal. Sam spent most of the workday wondering if the entire thing had actually happened. Nobody mentioned it during office hours. Not because people had forgotten. Because everyone seemed to be waiting to see what happened next. Sam was doing the same thing. His phone sat beside his keyboard. Every time it vibrated, part of him hoped it was Emily. Every time it wasn't, he felt mildly ridiculous. By lunch, he'd finally convinced himself to focus on work. At 12:30, his phone buzzed. A text. Emily. His pulse immediately betrayed him. Hey. A simple message. Yet somehow it carried more weight than it should have. He smiled. Hey. Her reply arrived a few moments later. Are you free after work? Sam stared at the screen. Then read the message again. Then a third time, just to be sure. A surprising amount of courage disappeared when 3 words appeared after that. Just us? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, yeah, just us. Sam leaned back in his chair. A slow smile spread across his face. I'd like that. The rest of the afternoon passed at the speed of continental drift. By 5 o'clock, Sam was convinced clocks were capable of spite. Eventually freedom arrived. They agreed to meet at a small coffee shop downtown. Not too crowded. Not too quiet. The kind of place where conversation could happen naturally. Sam arrived 10 minutes early, then immediately regretted it. Waiting gave him too much time to think. Fortunately, Emily arrived before his imagination could create any new disasters. She spotted him and smiled. The familiar smile. Only now it seemed different, more intentional, as though neither of them was pretending not to notice things anymore. Hi. Hi. Both laughed. The awkwardness wasn't unpleasant. It felt almost inevitable. After months of circling each other, neither quite knew how to start. They ordered coffee and settled into a corner table. For a minute neither spoke. Then Emily smiled. We're being weird. A little. A lot. Probably. That earned a laugh. The tension eased. Finally Emily folded her hands around her coffee cup. I wanted to talk about Friday. Sam felt his stomach tighten. Okay. You surprised me. That seems to be the general consensus. You know what I mean. He did. The joking response had simply bought him a second to think. Emily watched him carefully. You never told anyone? No. Why? Sam considered the question. The answer wasn't complicated, just difficult to explain. I never thought it mattered. It mattered Friday. He smiled. Apparently. I'm serious. I know. Emily held his gaze. For once neither looked away. You got on that stage and suddenly everybody saw a completely different side of you. Sam leaned back in his chair. I don't think it was a different side. No. No. Just a private one. Something in her expression softened. A look of understanding. That makes sense. He found himself relaxing. The conversation felt easier than he'd expected. Honest. Comfortable. Then Emily took a breath. There was something else. Oh. Sam suddenly felt far less relaxed. What? A faint blush appeared on her cheeks. The sight almost made him forget how to breathe. What Sarah said. Oh. At Mark's cookout. Oh. The second O came out considerably quieter. Emily laughed nervously. Yeah. For a moment both stared into their drinks. Neither seemed eager to be first. Years could have passed at that pace. Fortunately, Emily finally shook her head. No. We're not doing this. What? This. She gestured between them. The weird thing where we both know what we're talking about but pretend we don't. Sam laughed before he could stop himself. The honesty caught him off guard. Emily smiled. There he is. What does that mean? That's the guy who got on stage. The guy on stage had liquid courage. The guy on stage had confidence. I had beer. You had confidence. They stared at each other, neither willing to surrender. Finally Sam sighed. Maybe a little confidence. Exactly. The smile she gave him nearly ruined whatever remained of his composure. Then her expression grew more serious. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you ever ask me out? The directness stunned him. Not because she sounded angry, because she sounded genuinely curious, as though she truly wanted to know. The answer arrived before he could overthink it. Because I wasn't sure. About what? You. Emily blinked. Me? I didn't know if you were interested. For several seconds she simply stared at him. Then she laughed. Not mockingly. In disbelief. Oh my God. What? You can't be serious. Now it was Sam's turn to be confused. I am. Emily covered her eyes. The laughter continued. Sam. What? I was practically waving flags. He stared. She stared back. The realization hit them both simultaneously. Months. Months of misunderstanding. Months of missed opportunities. Months of each assuming the other needed clearer signals. The absurdity finally overwhelmed them. Both started laughing. Hard. The kind that leaves people shaking their heads. When it finally subsided, Emily wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. This is unbelievable. A little. A lot. Fair. She smiled again. Then asked the question that mattered. So you like me? The world suddenly became very quiet. Sam met her eyes. No stage. No song. No place to hide. Just honesty. Yeah. The single word felt surprisingly easy. The truth usually was. A nervous smile appeared on Emily's face. Good. His heartbeat accelerated. Good. Good. She looked down briefly before looking back up. Because I like you too. The sentence landed like a freight train. Months of doubt vanished in an instant. Not gradually. Instantly. Sam actually laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. Emily laughed too. What? I can't believe we're finally having this conversation. Me neither. I feel like Mark owes us an apology. Mark thinks he's a hero. Unfortunately, he might be. That sent them both into another fit of laughter. When it subsided, something had changed. The uncertainty was gone. Not all nervousness. Not all vulnerability. Just the question marks. For the first time, they both knew where they stood. And once that happened, everything became simpler. Not easy. Just simpler. The conversation stretched into the evening. The coffee shop grew quieter. Other customers came and went. Neither noticed much. They talked about family, plans, dreams they hadn't shared with many people, stories from their childhoods, the things people discuss when they finally stop wondering whether they're allowed to care. Outside, the sun began to set. Eventually, Emily glanced through the window. We've been here for 3 hours. Sam looked surprised. Have we? She laughed. That's generally a good sign. I think so. A comfortable silence settled between them. This one felt different from all the others. Not unfinished. Complete. Emily smiled softly. So, are you going to ask me out? The challenge in her eyes made him grin. Finally, at long last, a question he knew how to answer. Emily Carter. Yes. Would you like to have dinner with me Saturday? Her smile widened immediately. I'd love to. For a second, neither moved. Neither spoke. They simply sat there smiling like two people who'd spent months making something far harder than it needed to be. And perhaps they had. But neither was thinking about the lost months anymore. They were thinking about Saturday. And for the first time in a very long time, the future looked less like something Sam was waiting for. It looked like something he was finally stepping into. Chapter 7. Learning to be seen. Saturday arrived faster than either of them expected. For Sam Jefferson, this was unusual. Most weeks moved at a predictable pace. Monday became Tuesday. Work filled the days. Projects occupied his attention. Time behaved itself. This week had not behaved itself. Ever since coffee with Emily, his thoughts kept drifting. Not obsessively. Not in the dramatic movie sense. Just often enough that he caught himself smiling for no apparent reason. His coworkers noticed. Unfortunately, you look happy. Sam looked up from his desk. Mark stood there holding a coffee, looking entirely too pleased with himself. I am happy. Oh wow. What? You admitted it. Why wouldn't I? Mark blinked, then pointed dramatically toward the ceiling. Write this down. Historic moment. Sam laughed. The sound surprised both of them. Not because he never laughed, because recently he seemed to do it more. Mark noticed that too. A thoughtful expression briefly replaced the teasing. Seriously though? What? I'm happy for you. Sam smiled. Thanks. Mark nodded. Then ruined the moment immediately. If you somehow screw this up, I'm going to be furious. There he is. You're welcome. The conversation ended with both of them laughing. And for perhaps the first time, Sam didn't mind being teased. Because things were finally moving forward. Saturday evening arrived. Sam stood in front of his bathroom mirror adjusting his collar. Then readjusting it. Then adjusting it again. This is ridiculous. He knew it was ridiculous. The collar had been fine from the beginning. The problem wasn't the shirt. It was anticipation. His phone buzzed. A message from Emily. On my way. A smile immediately appeared. He didn't bother fighting it. Looking forward to it. The reply came almost instantly. Me too. 3 simple words. Enough to settle his nerves. Mostly. The restaurant wasn't fancy. Neither of them wanted fancy. They wanted conversation. The kind that had become increasingly easy during the past week. When Emily arrived, Sam felt the now familiar disruption to his thought process. Not because she looked drastically different. Because she looked like herself. And lately that seemed more than enough. She smiled as she approached. There you are. There I am. I was starting to think you'd gotten lost. I got here first. Details. He laughed. The evening began smoothly. Dinner arrived. Conversation flowed. The first hour passed effortlessly. The second felt somehow even easier. Without the uncertainty hanging over them, there was room for honesty. Real honesty. Not just flirtation. Not just attraction. The deeper things. The things that actually mattered. At one point, Emily rested her elbows lightly on the table. Can I tell you something? Of course. She hesitated. The first genuine hesitation of the evening. I'm glad you asked me out. The admission sounded vulnerable. Small. But important. Sam smiled. I'm glad you said yes. Emily looked down briefly, then back up. I was starting to think you never would. The words carried a gentle humor. But something else underneath. Something uncertain. Sam recognized it immediately, because he'd felt the same thing. I know. You do. Yeah. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I spent months convincing myself I was being patient. Emily laughed softly. That's exactly what I did. The realization amused both of them. Again. Months wasted. Months spent waiting. Months spent hoping the other person would create certainty first. Emily shook her head. We really are terrible at communication. We were. The correction slipped out before he thought about it. Emily smiled. We were. The distinction mattered. Because they were communicating now. Maybe not perfectly, but honestly. And honest was better. After dinner, they decided to take a walk. The evening air was cool. Downtown streets buzzed with weekend activity. People drifted between shops and restaurants. Music floated from somewhere in the distance. For a while, they simply walked. Comfortable silence. Comfortable proximity. Eventually, Emily spoke. Can I ask another question? Sure. Why haven't you dated much? Sam wasn't offended. The curiosity made sense. He considered the answer. I think I got busy. With work. Partly. He nodded. And the house. Emily understood that. Buying a first home wasn't a small goal. Especially alone. I always thought I'd do that with someone. The words escaped before he could stop them. Emily glanced toward him. What do you mean? Sam shoved his hands into his pockets. When I was younger, I assumed I'd get married first, then buy a house together. Exactly. Emily nodded. Neither spoke for several moments. Then Sam continued. As I got older, I realized life doesn't always happen in the order you expect. No, it doesn't. His voice remained calm, not bitter, not sad, simply honest. I stopped waiting for my life to start. The statement hung between them. Emily felt something tighten in her chest, because she understood the feeling, maybe more than he realized. So you built your life anyway? Yeah. She smiled. Good. He looked over. Good. Good. Her answer came without hesitation. I like that you did. Something warm settled inside him. The conversation could have ended there, but Emily wasn't finished. You know what I think? What? I think that's one of the reasons I like you. Sam blinked. She continued before nerves could stop her. You don't pretend. His gaze remained fixed on her. Emily shrugged. A lot of people spend their lives trying to become whoever they think everybody wants. The statement contained just enough personal experience to make him wonder. You've met people like that? Unfortunately, the answer made them both laugh. Then her expression softened. You know who you are. The compliment landed harder than she intended, because it addressed something Sam had quietly worried about for years. Whether who he was would ever be enough. Whether someone would eventually ask him to become someone else. Something louder, flashier, different. Emily seemed to sense the shift immediately. What? He exhaled slowly. You know what's funny? What? I actually worried you wouldn't like me. She stopped walking. Actually stopped. The surprise on her face was almost comical. Sam. What? You sang a Chris Stapleton song in front of a packed restaurant. He laughed. I know. You own a house. I know. You're kind. I'm aware. She rolled her eyes. The smile remained. You're impossible. So I've been told. Emily shook her head, then stepped a little closer. Close enough that his heartbeat became suddenly noticeable. You really didn't think I liked you? Honestly, I hoped you did. The answer was quiet, uncomplicated, truthful. Her expression softened completely. That's fair. Then she surprised him, not with words, by reaching for his hand. The gesture was simple, natural, yet it felt more intimate than anything else had. Sam looked at their joined hands, then back at her. Emily suddenly appeared slightly nervous herself, which somehow made the moment even better. We're getting better at this communication thing, she said. We are. Still room for improvement. Definitely. She laughed. The sound echoed softly through the evening air. Together they continued walking, hand in hand, not rushing, not forcing anything, just moving forward. For the first time, neither was wondering what the other felt. Neither was searching for hidden meanings. Neither was waiting for perfect timing. They were simply learning something neither had been particularly good at before. How to let themselves be known, and how to trust someone else with what they saw. For two people who had spent months hiding behind caution, it felt like the beginning of something much bigger than a first date. It felt like the beginning of a relationship. The real kind, built not on perfect words, but on finally saying the honest ones. Chapter 8. No more missed chances. For nearly 2 months, things went surprisingly well. That fact alone made both Sam and Emily slightly suspicious. Not because either expected disaster. Life had simply taught them that relationships involved complications, misunderstandings, mistakes, occasional uncertainty. Instead, things felt easy, not effortless. Good relationships still required attention, but easy in the sense that being together never felt like work. They talked a lot, sometimes over dinner, sometimes during long walks through Sam's neighborhood, sometimes through text messages sent during lunch breaks. The conversations that once seemed impossible now happened naturally, and with each passing week, both found themselves growing more comfortable, more invested, more vulnerable, more real, which, unfortunately, was exactly why the first major misunderstanding hurt so much. Started on a Wednesday evening. The kind of problem that seemed small at first. The kind that often became bigger when people avoided talking about it. Sam was sitting on his couch when his phone vibrated. A text from Emily. How was your day? He smiled, then opened the message. Before he could answer, another text arrived. Actually, call me when you get a chance. That was unusual. Emily preferred talking when something mattered. His smile faded slightly. He called immediately. She answered after the second ring. Hey! Her voice sounded normal. Mostly. But something felt off. Everything okay? A brief pause followed. Yeah. The hesitation concerned him. No, really. Another pause. Then, can I ask you something? His stomach tightened. Of course. Emily exhaled slowly. I heard something today. Immediately, Sam's brain began searching for possible mistakes. Unfortunately, there were too many options. What did you hear? Another pause. Then, somebody told me they're pretty sure you went on a date last weekend. Confusion replaced anxiety. What? That's what I thought. Now he was genuinely lost. I definitely didn't. I know. The words arrived quickly. Too quickly. As though she'd already answered the question herself. Then what's wrong? A small, embarrassed laugh came through the phone. I think I'm annoyed with myself. That wasn't the answer he'd expected. Why? Emily hesitated again. And suddenly Sam understood. Not the details. The feeling. Jealousy. Insecurity. Fear. The same emotions he'd experienced himself before they started dating. I didn't believe it, she admitted quietly. But I hated how much it bothered me. The honesty surprised him. Not because it was unusual. Because it was brave. The old version of Emily might have kept those feelings hidden. The old version of Sam certainly would have. Instead she was saying them out loud. Trusting him with them. That mattered. A lot. He leaned back against the couch. Do you want to know what I think? What? I think you're human. A brief laugh escaped her. That's your wisdom? I'm just getting started. Good. You know how many ridiculous things I worried about before we started dating? Emily smiled despite herself. A lot. A truly concerning number. The smile reached her voice this time. Fair. Sam continued. I think caring about somebody means occasionally getting scared. The line sat quietly between them, neither rushing to fill the silence. Then Emily spoke. I don't like feeling insecure. I know. I thought I'd grown out of that. You don't grow out of being human. You should put that on a coffee mug. I'll think about it. She laughed properly this time. And just like that, some of the tension disappeared. But not all of it. Something still lingered. Something Sam could hear beneath her words. That's not everything. The statement wasn't a question. Emily sighed. No. What is it? Another pause. Then, I think part of me was worried because things have been going so well. There it was. The real issue. Not the rumor. Not the imaginary date. Fear. Simple, ordinary fear. The fear that comes when something becomes important. Sam understood immediately, because he'd been carrying a version of it himself. Not every day. Not constantly. But enough. Enough to recognize it. What are you afraid of? The question was gentle. No judgment. Just curiosity. Emily took her time answering. I'm afraid this isn't real. The confession barely rose above a whisper. Yet it landed with surprising weight. Because she meant it. Not literally. She wasn't questioning whether they were together. She was questioning whether something this good could last. Sam stared out his living room window, thinking. Finally he smiled. Can I tell you a secret? Sure. I still have moments where I think you're going to figure out I've been making this up as I go. Emily laughed. What? It's true. You seem very confident. I sang one song. A very good song. Still only one song. The laughter grew, and with it came relief, comfort, perspective. The things fear often pushes aside. Eventually Emily's voice softened. We're kind of ridiculous. A little. A lot. Fair. The familiar exchange made them both smile. For a while they simply talked. Not about rumors. Not about imaginary problems. About their actual feelings. The things underneath. The things worth discussing. And by the end of the conversation both felt lighter. Not because insecurity had disappeared forever. Because neither had faced it alone. 3 days later, they sat together on Sam's back porch. The evening sun painted the sky orange and gold. A light breeze stirred through the neighborhood. Emily rested comfortably beside him. For several minutes neither spoke. Finally she broke the silence. You know what I learned this week? What? She smiled. Communication is annoying. Sam laughed. How so? Because it works. Terrible news. I know. She leaned lightly against his shoulder. If this had happened 6 months ago, I probably would have stayed quiet. Sam nodded. So would have I. That much felt obvious now. The people they had been at the beginning of this story weren't bad communicators. They were cautious communicators. Careful communicators. People who waited for certainty before speaking. The problem was that certainty rarely arrived on its own. Sometimes it had to be created through honesty. That lesson had taken both of them longer than necessary to learn. But they had learned it. Together. Emily tilted her head slightly. Any regrets? The answer came easily. No. She smiled. Good. Although. Her eyes narrowed. Although. I regret not asking you out sooner. She laughed immediately. That's fair. Could have saved us several months. Definitely. Possibly an entire year of confusion. Also fair. They both laughed. The sound drifted into the evening air. Comfortable. Warm. Certain. After a moment, Emily squeezed his hand. At least we got here. Sam looked at her. The woman he'd spent months trying to talk to. The woman who'd spent months trying to be noticed. The woman sitting beside him now. No misunderstandings. No missed opportunities. No unfinished conversations. Just them. Yeah, he said softly. We did. Emily smiled. Then kissed him. Slow. Simple. Certain. When they pulled apart, neither felt the need to say anything else. Some moments didn't require words. For people who had spent so long struggling to communicate, that felt oddly appropriate. The future remained unwritten. Life would still present challenges, unexpected problems, occasional fears, but they had learned something important. Love wasn't the absence of misunderstandings. It was the willingness to talk through them. And as the evening sun settled beyond the horizon, Sam found himself thinking something he hadn't believed for a long time. Maybe the future wasn't something to worry about. Maybe it was something to look forward to. And for the first time, he wasn't looking toward it alone. Epilogue. The next song 3 years later. Sam Jefferson had always assumed that becoming a husband would feel different. More dramatic, more life-changing, more obvious. Instead, it had happened the same way most of the best things in his life had happened. Gradually, one ordinary day at a time. Not that marrying Emily had been ordinary. That day remained one of the happiest memories of his life. But 3 years later, what stood out most wasn't the wedding. It was everything afterward. The quiet mornings, the shared routines, the grocery lists on the refrigerator, the evenings spent on the couch discussing absolutely nothing important, the countless small moments that somehow became the foundation of an extraordinary life. As Sam stood in what had once been his home office, he smiled at the sight in front of him. Boxes, paint samples, disassembled furniture, baby books, a half-built crib. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor in the middle of the chaos, 7 months pregnant, and somehow still beautiful enough to completely derail his thoughts. She looked up from the instruction manual she wasn't actually reading. "You're staring again." "I am not." "You absolutely are." He grinned. "Maybe a little." "A little." The skepticism in her voice earned a laugh. 3 years had not diminished their ability to have the same conversations. They had merely perfected them. Emily set the instructions aside. "We may need help." "We don't need help." She pointed toward the pile of crib parts. "We definitely need help." Sam examined the pieces, then the instructions, then the pieces again. His confidence decreased noticeably. "Okay. Thank you. We might need help. I appreciate your honesty." He walked over and carefully lowered himself beside her. Immediately, Emily rested her head against his shoulder. The motion was unconscious, familiar, comfortable, the kind of affection that came from years of choosing each other every day. For a while neither spoke. The room remained quiet. Sunlight filtered through the windows. The future nursery felt unfinished. But not for much longer. Their son would arrive in less than 10 weeks. The thought still felt surreal. "You nervous?" Emily asked softly. "A little." "Me too." That answer made him smile. The admission wasn't surprising. One of the best things about their marriage was that they had long since stopped pretending. No pretending they had everything figured out. No pretending they weren't scared sometimes. No pretending they were perfect. 3 years earlier, both of them might have hidden those feelings. Now they simply talked about them. "What if we're terrible at this?" Emily asked. Sam looked down at her. "At parenting?" "Yeah." He considered it. "Then we'll be terrible together." She laughed. "That's not reassuring." "It kind of is." He kissed the top of her head. "Besides, we're already doing pretty well." Emily smiled. "You think so?" "I know so." Her hand drifted automatically to her stomach. The gesture captured his attention every time. Still amazed him. Their child. Their family. The future version of himself would probably never stop being astonished by that fact. When he was younger, he'd imagined a wife and family someday. Then he'd spent years convincing himself it might never happen. Not bitterly, just realistically. Life had looked different than he'd expected. So he'd built a house, built a career, built a life, and somehow that life had eventually created room for everything he'd thought he might not get. The irony still made him laugh. Emily glanced up. "What?" "I was just thinking. That's always dangerous." "True. What were you thinking about?" Sam smiled. "About how close I came to missing all this." Her expression softened immediately. She knew exactly what he meant. The months of uncertainty, the missed chances, the conversations neither had been brave enough to have. The endless almost. Emily shook her head. "I was just as bad." "You were. Thank you for agreeing so quickly." "I'm being honest." "You always are." The statement carried quiet affection. The kind that still surprised him sometimes. Not because he doubted her. Because he still occasionally caught himself appreciating the fact that she knew him so well. A phone buzzed somewhere in the room. Emily glanced at the screen, then groaned. "What?" "Sarah." "That's never good." Emily laughed. "No, it's good." She opened the message. A moment later she snorted. "Oh no." "What?" "She's reminding us about open mic night." Sam immediately shook his head. "Absolutely not." 3 years hadn't changed everyone's opinion about his surprise performance. If anything, the story had become larger. More mythical. Far more embarrassing. Emily smirked. "You know she'll never let it go." "I know. You did start an entire relationship." "I sang one song." "You started a relationship." "I wasn't trying to." Emily gave him a look. A very specific look. One perfected through marriage. A look that communicated complete disbelief. Sam laughed. "Fine. Thank you." I was maybe trying a little. A little. He recognized his own words being used against him. And now who's skeptical? Emily's laughter filled the room. Warm. Familiar. One of his favorite sounds in the world. Their laughter faded. Comfortable silence returned. Then Emily took his hand. For several moments neither spoke. The nursery remained unfinished. The crib remained unbuilt. The paint remained undecided. But none of that felt urgent. Not compared to this moment. Not compared to sitting beside the woman who had become his best friend, his wife, and soon the mother of his child. After a while, Emily squeezed his hand. You know, she said softly, I'm glad the universe kept interrupting you. Sam blinked. That's a new opinion. Think about it. He did. Surprisingly, she had a point. Every interruption, every mischance, every delayed conversation, they had all led here. Not because fate had orchestrated everything, but because eventually they had learned to stop waiting, to stop assuming, to start talking, to take the risk. Sam smiled. Yeah. Emily rested her head against his shoulder again. Yeah. Outside, evening sunlight stretched across the backyard of the house Sam had once thought he'd fill alone. Inside, surrounded by boxes and plans and the quiet anticipation of parenthood, he felt something he had spent years hoping for. Not perfection, not certainty, something better. Home. And somewhere in the future, there would be more conversations, more milestones, more challenges, more songs. But for now, Sam was exactly where he wanted to be. And this time, there were no more mischances.